I'm Josh with Skid Pro. Today we're going to take a look at our Generation 2 industrial brush cutters. If you know Skid Pro, you know this is one of our best-selling, most popular attachments, and really one of those attachments where we are so heads and tails above the rest of the competition out there. I know that's a bold statement, but when we dig into the details, I think you'll see that I'm right when I say that. So this is what we call our industrial brush cutter series. It's our closed front over here and our open front over here with the push bar. The closed front, the deck stays over the entire blades. The blades are under the deck at all times. Although we have cut back the front, it's not square, so they're not too far into the deck. That way you put a little pressure on that tree and the blades are going to hit it very quickly. Here's our open front model. You can see it is open in the front. It has the V cut in the deck and a big push bar. The closed front has a 6-inch cutting capacity. That's industry leading on a standard flow machine. The open front has an 8-inch cut capacity. That's an amazing and also industry leading cut capacity on standard flow. So standard flow, these cutters will work from 15 gallons a minute all the way up to 26 gallons per minute max. Above 26 gallons and we got to upgrade to our high flow brush cutter with the 6000 Eaton Charlene motor. Anytime we talk attachments, you know I like to talk weight and construction. Why? Because these products get used hard in the real world and we know heavier products are going to stand up better. So where do these two stack in? Well, we are already the heaviest standard flow brush cutter on the market, and these have gained a couple hundred pounds compared to our Generation 1 series. So these Gen 2 models are pushing over 1,700, approaching 1,800 pounds. They are built solid. We start with a 1/4-inch deck. That's an option on some people's cutters, not on ours. That's the minimum amount we're okay with. We run 3.5 by 3-inch mainframe tube steel square tubing across the decks. That gives us that lateral strength all the way back. There's 3 of them on the open front and 4 of them on the closed front. We essentially use the front on the X4 closed for a bumper, essentially a low profile push bar there. So one of the reasons that structural integrity is so critical is because you think the massive cutting capacity this cutter has, and you're pushing on 6 and 8-inch trees, you need that deck to be as stiff as possible. That's why we run the vertical stiffeners all the way from the rear plate all the way to the front plate. These gussets are 3/8 inches thick and 12 inches tall. Tremendous amount of lateral stiffness there. To tie in the full strength of the deck, we run a 2.5-inch diameter high tensile push bar all the way around. That push bar is welded into the main deck and it's tied into our oversized vertical gussets. That is critical. When you're pushing big trees, you need the strength of that. There's actually some companies out there that run a bolt-on push bar. Think about that, a bolt-on push bar. There's no way you can convince me it has anywhere close to the strength of something like this that's tied into the deck in multiple spots. On top of that, we run 1/2-inch thick extra gusseted steel bumper around the front, and that ties in to our 2.5-inch wide by 1/2-inch thick skid shoes that run the entire length of the brush cutter. Another feature of our heavy-duty push bar is we actually extend the push bar just in front of the blades. That way you put pressure on that tree. When the blades hit and cut it off, then the tree springs forward out of your way. It won't hit the mower or the skid loader. And it also puts that added tension to make a nice clean cut. If you want direct blade to tree contact, you can simply roll your mower back slightly, or anywhere in this side of the cutout, the blades reach directly onto the tree ahead of the push bar. Now let's take a look at the heart of that drive system, the motor, the drive shaft, and how that connects down to the flywheel. at the end of the day, that is what determines your performance and your longevity. How this thing cuts. That's what's going to be tested. Let's take a quick look into the details of this drive system to see the Skid Pro difference. We start with the direct drive motor, and we start with the best motor in the industry, Eaton Charlene. There's a lot of other motor options out there, but no question the toughest, longest lasting motors are Eaton Charlene motors. Next we look at the drive shaft. Heaviest drive shaft in the industry for any standard flow. 3 3/4 drive shaft. At the base, it's actually 5.5 inches. It's just built solid. It's overbuilt, but it's built to last. And that's one of the things we did with our standard flow cutter. We actually, when we redesigned the high flow unit, we came up with this shaft design. And it costs a little bit more, but we decided to spread it out over all the standard flow units as well. So not only is this drive shaft bigger than most direct drive high flow units, it doesn't even come close to the gearbox model. It's such a stark comparison. Those gearbox models are likely to have an inch, 1.25 inch shaft coming out of that gearbox. It doesn't support any weight. That's why you have those 80-pound flywheels and 2 blades. If you're going to have that super heavy flywheel and 4 blades, you need to have the support of a direct drive shaft. And that is a huge difference when you're comparing different cutters on the market. Here's our unique spline hub. It's how we marry the motor into that drive shaft. It's a special square design so it can come in and out of easily. It's a hardened tempered steel. Another detail that we think is very important is the wire protection kit. This wire protection kit prevents getting wire wrap and getting in and taking out that lower bearing seal. It's a fairly simple design, really. It's a series of posts on the bottom and then also on the top, and they go together and prevent wire from passing through. On top of that, we have our Bulldog shaft collar, and that collar gives an added level of protection, making it very, very difficult for any wire to be able to pass through a small gap and get in and take out that seal. The next thing we take a look at is the bearing housing. Cast iron. This thing weighs all of 80 pounds. It's an 8-inch bearing housing with oversized 6-inch bearings. There's one on the bottom part of the bearing housing that's submerged in oil, and then there's one on top. The bearing housing bolts right down to the deck. Check this out. That's a massive 12-inch diameter footprint on the deck. That gives lateral strength, and it gives a tremendous amount of stability. This is the footprint, essentially, that supports the drive shaft and that heavy flywheel. You compare that to gearbox cutters out there that have a footprint of 6 inches maybe, it's a night and day comparison. One of the key areas of why this cutter performs so well is our extra heavy flywheel. This flywheel weighs nearly 500 pounds. The whole drive system is almost 550. Think about that weight for a second. Compare 550 to an 80-pound gearbox flywheel. No comparison. Our flywheel is industry-leading 1-inch thick. It's a high tensile plate for durability and longevity. But the key is that weight, the inertia that carries it through, and it's why it gives it industry-leading cutting capacities. In retrospect, that means our bearing housing alone of our whole drive system weighs more than a 2-blade gearbox flywheel. Not only do we have the thickest, heaviest flywheel in the industry of any standard flow cutter, we give it 4 blades. Huge difference. When you factor all that in together, that's where you really see such an amazing performance increase. Direct drive, heavy flywheel, 4 blades. That's what makes this the best performing standard flow cutter on the market, bar none. One of the things we pride ourselves on at Skid Pro is listening to the customer. And our Generation 1 cutters were not the easiest to get the cover off of. So we listened. We got a new hood cover that's easily accessible to view from the back to check your bearing housing oil level and to just be able to check on the motor, yet gives full protection up front and is easy to check and take the cover off. So you simply reach in, remove the lock nut on the one side, and then raise up, and you have complete access to your motor and bearing housing. If you have any questions about this or any other Skid Pro product, call the Product Gurus at 877-378-4642 or visit us online at www.skidpro.com.